Welcome to CMM's 2021 Restroom Care webinar, brought to you by our publisher, ISSA, and our sponsors, Steramis by Tome Environmental Solutions and TBS Capital Funding. Thanks. Good morning. I'm Amy Richardson, the managing editor for CMM. I'll be moderating today's program. Thank you for joining us. CMM offers many resources for facility managers, in-house service providers, and building service contractors. Visit cmmonline.com to subscribe to our magazine and sign up for our daily news, and be sure to connect with us on Twitter and Facebook. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. We invite you to submit questions for our presenters today through the Q&A feature. We will answer them at the end of the program in a Q&A session. All attendee phones and audio are automatically muted during the program. You will be emailed a recording of today's webinar later this week. A recording will also be available on our website. Thank you again for joining us today. Before we get started, here's a message from our sponsor, Steramis by Tome Environmental Solutions. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Todd Stoneking. Todd is a facility supervisor at the University of Utah, where his cleaning career began in 1989, while working part-time for the custodial department to put himself through school. He never left. He quickly grew through the ranks and now oversees the long-term care of the campus. Todd is the former president of the Utah Collegiate Custodial Association and a bronze member contributor with the IICRC, where he serves on the S400 Cleaning Standard Committee. He may look familiar. Todd appeared on the cover of the ISSA official exhibit directory in 2015. Thank you for joining us today, Todd. I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, well, thank you, Amy, and good morning. If we can go ahead and go to the first slide here. So as we're doing this today, I'm going to hopefully explain and give you a little bit of my knowledge of what I've done and what we've done here at the university. In the small amount of time we have, I'm not sure if I can tell you everything, and not necessarily going to try to, but we'll pass on hopefully some good information that will be useful to you. So the university, if it was a city in Utah, it would be the 8th largest city in Utah. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
Just a second.
University of Utah is one of the larger campuses in the state of Utah. We're approximately 1,500 acres. We have about 250 buildings on our campus. 121 of those is what I deal with. I do not deal with anything that houses patients or houses students, but pretty well deal with everything else on our campus. That's anything from research to just basic educational facilities. In those buildings that I deal with, we have approximately 516 restrooms that we have to deal with. Those are anywhere from a restroom in a performance building, which is about 30 stalls and or fixtures, to the smallest ones, which of course are just a single-use facility. Our largest building is about 750,000 usable square feet. And our smallest one is about 1,000 square feet, which was also the first building built on campus when they moved it to this location. We have a hospital on our campus, but I don't deal with that, but we are in the top 10 in the nation as for hospitals. Average students on our campus is about 32,000 in a quarter. And it shows because like it's just a small city and we have lots of usage of our buildings. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as part of our program, one of the big things is you have to have a plan. No matter where you're cleaning, what type of restrooms you're doing, or what type of facility, the plan is important. So we have a training manual. But let me start with what we do. So anytime a new person is hired, we start with training. Okay, the first thing we do is onboarding. So all our new employees, they come into a room, they sit in a room, we go through a lot of stuff with them. And that's anything from our hazard communication program to safety, to cleaning, and things that they can even learn to do here on campus. I mean, we have a theater on campus, we have a bowling alley, so a lot of fun stuff that they can do. That does include, of course, hands-on, okay? The next thing that we talk about, that we do up here, is we have a manual, which is covered in this onboarding. And if we can go ahead and go to the next page, please, or next slide, thank you. This manual is pretty basic. Okay, and it's also fairly big. It covers pretty well anything that we would do on this campus on our cleaning. So on this manual, I'm just going to pick on a little bit of it, just a small section here. For our routine cleaning of restrooms, first thing important in restrooms, we always clean top to bottom and dry to wet. Okay, one of the biggies when we're getting ready to clean a restroom is we put on our personal protective equipment. PPE, very important for anything you're doing, especially in the cleaning industry. Now, other things that we're going to do is as we get ready to do that, we're going to inspect the restroom, make sure we have our supplies. If there's any issues, we're going to report those to the proper person. Once we've got all those supplies together and stocked, then we're going to move towards the restroom. And one of the first things we're going to do is get out our caution or restroom close sign. And of course, we don't want to close down all the restrooms in a building at the same time. So we, work so that's not happening because many of our buildings are cleaned by multiple people. But we get that restroom secured, whether that's by knocking on the door and making sure it's empty, or by actually walking in and making sure it's empty, depending on what sex and which sex is cleaning that restroom. And then we just actually go into the cleaning procedures. For us, we start with lights. If there's lights out, we want to get those replaced. Some facilities will do those later, but for us, that's, we do it now. Then we start with our high work. We start with dusting, getting the wall vents, working down, getting partitions, ledges, and walls, and pick up other stuff. Okay, get the big things off the floor. And then once that's done, we apply a properly mixed, and we call it a university approved disinfectant because that disinfectant may change over time, or we may use more than one depending on what facility we're working in. And we get that disinfectant on the sinks, the toilets, the urinals, showers, or any other places that it needs to be on. Once we've got that down, we need to allow for dwell time. And that's something very important, okay? But while we're waiting for that dwell time for us, our next part of our plan is to get in, restock your toilet paper, your paper towels, and soap and other dispensers. Collect the trash next, get the sanitary napkin boxes and things like that. And that's part of our cleaning. And then we move into the part where we start having to pay attention to what's going on. Do we need to do extra in the restroom? Are we seeing buildup on the fixtures or on the stainless steel? And in that case, if you look at our little page here, number 3 is when needed. And that's the key word there, when needed. It's not done every day, but you're going to use a bowl cleaner, okay? And you're going to use that cleaner on the inside of the bowls and the urinals to remove the hard water, urine, or other contaminants. And that way we can get rid of those rings, okay? We tell people when you use this, you're going to use it on a swab. You're not going to just shoot it in there or spray it in there. And then as you're in there cleaning, be careful not to splash it all over because we don't want to damage other fixtures. If you're going to be using this on the outside of a toilet or a urinal, like on the chrome, very important is we don't use a pad or a scrubber that is too harsh. We don't actually provide anything other than just a white scrubber to our people. And that's the reason why we do that. And anyhow, as we're cleaning our restroom, we continue to go on with what we're doing. As you're cleaning, you've scrubbed down everything. We'll dry everything down after we've cleaned. Final steps, we finish up the mirrors, mop the floors as we're working out of this restroom. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this because the process is going to be pretty well the same for anybody that's doing this. But again, we have a plan set in place and we have a cleaning manual. Now, one thing we've learned is this cleaning manual is big. So most people don't carry it around with them. So we've created some other stuff. If we can go to the next slide, please. We have what we call worker task cards. And when we first started this, we created these big ones, you can see in the upper two pictures. And this covers, again, basic everything we do. And it goes into detail, as to how you do that. Again, a little large, found it hard to carry around, especially for new people, but we put them on all their carts. What we've went to is these small ones you see in the bottom, these little multi-fold cards. And these are handed out during the training process. And we hand those to all of our new employees as they are doing training. And so that way, once they go out into the work area and we did hands-on with them, they have an idea, hey, this is the process, this is what we should be doing. We give them these cards and then they have something to follow if they don't remember everything that they learned. All right, next slide, please. We always finish up, of course, we do hands-on with all our people. And some of the things that we like to cover when we're doing that hands-on is the chemicals, okay? Chemicals is a big thing, okay? Now, numerous different brands, different companies make chemicals, but for the most part, they're very similar. So we have things that we use like glass cleaner. We use those on mirrors and for the final cleaning on your chrome and your bright work. This gets rid of water spots and shines things up. Disinfectant cleaners. That is another biggie for us, okay? Just got to find my note here. So, disinfectant cleaners, again, we use multiple brands depending on what we're cleaning, okay? But biggest thing with disinfectant cleaners is proper dwell time. Bowl cleaners, we also use descalers, okay? Most of those are mild acids, and we even use some non-acid bowl cleaners. That may vary depending on the part of the country you're going to be in as to what you have to use. Neutral cleaners. Generally use a neutral cleaner on our floor one time per week, because for those of you who have ever used Quats to mop your floor, which is great for killing the bacteria and germs, but you'll notice it gets sticky after about a week. And so we'll use that to go in and use that to clean that back off. And that gets our floors where you're not walking in and making that sticky sound. Degreasers is another big one with us. Okay, we like to use it on stainless steel and on our floors. We found that the stainless steel seems to pick up a lot of handprints, and the proper degreaser on our stainless steel is what works to remove those. One other thing that we use in our facilities is engineered water. We don't use it in all our restrooms because it is quite expensive to set up at first, but we're slowly moving that way. We use ozone in our facilities, and we have really good luck and results with it, used mostly in our bigger facilities. So talking about kind of the ozone systems we use on our campus, we have two systems that we use for our actual cleaning. We use the cart and the barrel like most everybody else uses. And with that, we work with microfibers, chemicals, in the cleaners, and then we have the mop and bucket. And with our mop and buckets, we no longer use the cotton mops because we've learned that bring around the restroom really a good thing to occur or not a good thing to occur. So what we've went to is we use the microfiber flat mops. And most of those are just the single use ones. You throw them in the bucket, you get them wet, you use them, then we throw them in a container and they're washed. Okay. But also on our campus, we use self-contained systems or the spray and vac systems. And this is like one of the ozone type systems, but we also have 2 or 3 other models and brands that we use. And what we like about these is you go in, you can spray everything down, and then you suck it out and remove it. And so you're not just moving around the dirt, but you're literally pulling it up and moving it off the floor. As a part of everything we do use microfibers. As all of you know, microfibers are really great at removing bacteria even without chemicals. But again, we use those to do what we need to do. Once those microfibers are done, they are used in a laundering system, and we do our own in-house on our campus. And so we use that laundering system. Big thing is with microfibers is make sure that you have good microfibers. Okay. You just don't go down to the dollar store and pick up your microfibers. Get them from a good vendor or your local vendor. They should know what to provide to you and which ones to get. And then if you are laundering, make sure you are laundering them correctly, because as we all know, certain things destroy microfibers, one of those being bleach and of course fabric softener. So there's a few other chemicals that are available, and sometimes we use them, but we don't like a lot of them. And so that's something I just wanted to cover really quick, like polishes. Now, we don't really like polishes in our restrooms here on the campus. Stainless steel polish, I know people love to sell that stuff and it makes it really shiny and bright. But since most of those are oil-based, what we found is you put it on the wall, then it's on your door, it's on your mirrors, and all over the place. And so we really stay away from our polishes. We like to use the degreasers in those restrooms just to wipe down, the surfaces. Urine remover, enzyme cleaners. We use those occasionally, okay? It helps to remove, that stuff that gets into the grout and the walls that you just can't clean off during your normal daily cleaning. And we'll talk about those a little later with a couple slides that I have to show. Odor cover-up. Most of us call those air fresheners. We avoid using those if we can, because if we're using those, it means that we're probably not cleaning the restroom good. And so there's odors remaining in those. We do use odor counteractants sometimes, but most of our buildings, we don't have to use that. But being a campus and being very old, we have buildings that date back to the 1800s. Some of those still have wood surfaces in them, and you do get a little deterioration. And so we can use odor counteractants to cover up that smell or help remove that smell. But again, if it's cleaned properly, you should never have to use that. Now, urinal screens, people love those things, but big thing we found is you want to use the ones that have the little fingers in them. So as people are using the urinals, we're not splashing urine all over the restroom off those flat surfaced ones. And that's very important to us because it actually cuts down on our cleaning if it's actually staying inside the urinal. And then final thing that I'll cover chemical wise is special cleaners. The biggest one for us is probably for waterless urinals. There's been a big move recently to put waterless urinals in across our campus. And so you can't use your normal cleaners in those because they actually destroy the product that's in the waterless urinals. And so there's special chemicals that if you're cleaning those, you do want to use. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the cleaning issues we see, and these are some that I thought I would talk about. Notice the urinal there on the left. You can see the green stripes coming down it. In Utah, we have perhaps some of the hardest water there is. I'm not sure, there's other places that probably beat us, but that water is about a scale of 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 in hardness. And it seems like anything we do, we have this buildup. So as you look at that urinal, you can see there's green stripes coming down it. That is something that we are going to do on a regular basis. We'll come in with our mild acid, we'll spread it around, keep that off. What we have learned, it is much easier to keep it clean than to have to come back and fix it later. Easy fix, you do your normal cleaning, you scrub that down, you keep that out, you don't get buildup. Now that middle picture is one of my favorites. So I would like to say this is in a building, not ours, but it is. This building was shut down for a remodel. I had to go into the building, notice this, took a picture of it. The urinal actually, or the toilet actually went dry during this process. Don't know what was in it before it went dry. What we do know is this toilet will never be the same. Even with the strongest acid, we know this will not come out. They're not finished with the remodel yet, so we don't know if they're going to end up replacing the fixtures or what will happen. But again, I'm going to tell you, it's a lot easier to keep it clean than to have to go back later and fix it. My next slide over here, or the next picture on this slide, is if you notice the top of that chrome. Right on top of that chrome, there is some white calcium buildup. Again, we're going to use a mild acid cleaner. Big thing I'll tell you when we're working with acids is we don't ever spray them. Okay, we always put them in a flip top. And the reason for that, one, we don't want to be putting them into the air and aerosolizing them where we have to breathe that. But also we can pinpoint it and get it more where we want it. I've seen too many facilities where it's sprayed, it gets on the walls, it damages surfaces. And so that's something we want to stay away from. We want to pinpoint it. And then when we do come in and scrub the chrome, we want to use a specialized tool, okay, like a toothbrush or a white scrubber. If you use anything a lot stronger than that white scrubber, it will take the chrome usually off your fixtures. And if you're using a very strong acid, it may even eat it off quicker. So again, we like to stay with our most mild products that we can. Again, fix the problem before it becomes a problem. Next slide, please. A couple more cleaning issues that we see and have occurred on our campus is picture over here on the left. Notice down inside this fixture, which is a urinal, there's buildup down inside it. What we found that the problem was actually with this was the tools that we were using. They couldn't get down in and hit those bends. And so even if we put a really strong acid, you couldn't get it out because you couldn't scrub it. And so tools sometimes is what you need. If the tools you're using aren't doing what you need them to do, find a tool that will. Again, check with local vendors, best chances you can find it. Middle picture here, nothing wrong with the urinal. They actually have the urinal looking really good, but if you notice the floor, it has a little different color right there in front of the urinal. This is usually from urine getting on the floor and getting in the grout. This is the place that we're going to use our degreasers and our enzyme cleaners. We'll come into the restroom first, generally with a degreaser. We will scrub the floor as best we can. And then if that still exists, which usually it does because it seeps down to the grout, we'll place that enzyme cleaner on the floor and allow it to sit as long as possible. It's really great if you can give it a day or so, but in a facility like us, where we're sometimes 24/7, it isn't possible. But again, this is a place you're going to use those enzyme cleaners to clean things and let them do the work rather than you get in there and physically have to do it. My final picture in this slide over here on the right side, you notice there's a sink and you can see that fixture. There's kind of some black around that fixture. Again, this comes from not cleaning it properly. Tools is what we had to get here. What we've learned is you can buy some really soft bristle toothbrushes, and those are very effective with a little mild cleaner. And if you're maintaining it regularly, you usually don't even need that mild acid. You can drop that in there and just scrub a little bit and it will stay right clean. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Now, here's what we like to see, okay? And how do we get them to look like this? Well, besides having people actually clean them, we have to do inspections. Inspections, we've learned, are very important in restroom cleaning because, as you know, and you have employees that do this, sometimes you take the easiest path. So we have our managers and our crew leads. We do inspections basically on those two levels. Our managers will walk through the facilities and the buildings on a regular basis, and they will go into the restrooms. Now, we just use paper to make our notes with. You know, there's plenty of great programs out there, but we just do a document that's a 3-page document, and it just copies through. They'll make notes, and then they get back with the person who is responsible for that restroom and, you know, show them, hey, this needs to be corrected, or hey, here's our little problem. Here's what we're seeing. We also have our crew leads that do the same thing. Their response is a little more sooner usually because they're in the buildings on a more regular basis. So in this restroom here, you can notice that this is what we like to see. Look at that toilet. I mean, if you look, the chrome looks good, and the middle picture is actually the chrome because I knew you wouldn't be able to see it up close, but it's clean. Okay, the walls around there are clean. There's not buildup in the grout lines. They're white grout lines, and they are white grout lines in the picture. Okay, they're not yellow grout lines. So that's one thing we do like to keep really clean, and we have really good results if our people are doing what they should be doing. Again, you've got to spend the time, you've got to do the work. Our third picture here on this slide, this is a waterless urinal. I'm sure you've seen them in most of your facilities now. They're slowly getting out there more and more. But this is that one that we would talk about. You need to use that special product, okay, inside the urinals. Around the outside and other places, again, you may need to use your regular cleaners, possibly some enzyme cleaners to keep that clean. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So some more of what we like to see, okay? Took these in 2 different restrooms, and the biggest thing I'm going to point out in here is that stainless steel. On our campus, for some reason, they love stainless steel. We have a few of the old wooden ones and the metal ones that are painted, but they love the stainless steel because they think it looks shiny. Big problem we see with stainless steel is about anything gets on it, does leave a residue, and sometimes it does stain it. So we like to use degreasers most of the time, and we will come in, you'll spray your rags down and wipe down that stainless steel. Stainless steel, make sure you're wiping with the grain because that gives you the best results. Okay. On our campus, cleaning wise, we clean restrooms only one time per day for the most part. We'd like to clean it more, but our budgets are limited and there's plenty of other campus that has to be cleaned. Heavy use buildings, and we do have many of those. We do have day porters that will come through, pick up the big stuff and then move on. And, that's one way we help to keep our buildings clean, but it's not the only way. Sometimes we need the help from the people that are actually out there in the restrooms. Most of our restrooms have now what we call a little QR code, and we place that on the door or just inside the restroom. It says, scan this, and then when they scan it, it sends a report back that, hey, this restroom needs service or needs something. The other thing that we've did is for the occupants of the building and not the students, most of them know how to contact the crew lead, or we have a main trouble number here on our campus that they will contact and they can report, hey, there's a problem here. And then we'll respond somebody out to that. We do have one building that gets 2 cleanings a day, and that's our largest building, which is our library. And so they do clean about the 20 restrooms that are in that building twice a day. That building gets enormous use. But most of what we do is based on our budget and what we have. Biggest thing though, I'm going to point out as you're cleaning is you need to pay attention. You need to see where the problems are. You need to correct those problems because that's what's going to create your problems in your restroom. Basically in conclusion of what I'm saying here is, that's our job. That's what we're doing. We're keeping them clean for the people that use them. I'd like to thank you for my time today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Amy and then Perry, who will pass on some more great information to you.
Thanks, Todd. That was great information. I'd like to remind our audience you can submit questions for the Q&A throughout the program. We'll have time at the end of the presentation to answer those. And before we turn the program over to our second speaker, Perry, let's hear from our sponsor, TBS Capital Funding.
This stinks. You know what stinks even more? Unstable cash flow. Waiting 30, 60, or even 90 days to get paid by your clients can affect your ability to buy supplies, pay your vendors, advertise, make payroll, and so much more. That's where we come in. TBS Capital Funding pays you same day for your invoices, so you can focus on the important things like daily operations, building client relationships, and developing your business. Let TBS Capital Funding clean up your cash flow.
Now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Perry Shimanoff. Perry is a certified master custodial trainer with ISSA's Cleaning Management Institute. He is the founder and president of MC² Management and Communication Consultants and has been involved in training both managers and frontline cleaning staff for more than 40 years. Perry formerly served on the International Custodial Advisory Network Board of Directors and is a current member. He has designed several computer applications for maintenance management, facility scheduling, and custodial operations. Welcome, Perry.
Thank you, Amy. So today I was almost late because the broom I was using, it overswept. Anyway, that's the last joke you're going to hear today. First of all, I'd like to thank Todd for discussing about chemicals and their impressive job card system that they used, that they've taken from their training manual and they've attached it to the carts. He also talked about the importance of inspecting. What I'm going to do is share 10 tips that if you embrace them, I guarantee it will make it easier for the custodians to clean and disinfect, but it will also provide your customers with a more positive experience. So Amy, if you'll go to the next slide, we'll get started. So tip number 1, use color-coded equipment, materials, and supplies to prevent cross-contamination. A best practice is you should have a separate cleaning cart or a separate barrel with apron for just your restroom supplies and equipment. Related to that, at the end of the work shift, it is important to clean and disinfect the cleaning cart. When you think about it, the cleanest location on any campus should be the custodial closet. The second cleanest location should be that custodial cart that we're pushing to the restrooms. And often we use red as a color for restroom, but you just need to be very, very consistent about that. So I wanted to mention let's go to tip number 2, Amy, please. Next slide. And Todd mentioned this also. Put out a conspicuous wet floor sign that is visible to the public. And even if nobody's in the building, you need to put it out there. And by the way, a bucket is not considered a wet floor sign. Also, it's important to announce yourself. It is amazing when you put out a wet floor sign, how many people suddenly need to have the urge to use a restroom. At Eastside Union High School District in San Jose, they've placed signs above restroom entryways that say it's off limits when being cleaned. And so wet floor sign, automatic. It can be barricade tape. It can be a cleaning cart, but it cannot just be a bucket itself. So Amy, if we'll go to the next slide for tip number 3. And Todd mentioned this, it's important to rotate your disinfectants. You might remember MRSA, which is a really bad staph infection. That came about because the bacteria built up resistance to the same product. So I recommend you have at least 2 different disinfectants to prevent any kind of superbug. And you might look at the pH so that one's slightly acid and one is slightly alkaline. And again, on the pH, we want to make sure we're not using hazardous chemicals. And as Todd mentioned, it's important to allow adequate dwell time for disinfectants. And that dwell time is 7 to 10 minutes in order to achieve a 99.9997% cure rate. So Amy, if we'll go to the next slide, please. Todd mentioned about enzyme cleaners. Enzymes are basically other bacteria that kill the bad stuff. It's a particularly effective cleaning technique if the restroom is going to be closed for a weekend or long period of time. And enzymes are also excellent to use on grout that hasn't been properly sealed. I recommend you get green certified cleaning supplies. And when you use an enzyme cleaner, you do not mix it with a disinfectant. That disinfectant will kill the enzymes and it'll reduce the efficacy of the product. So enzyme cleaners should be one of the cleaning chemicals that you have available in your toolkit. Amy, if we can go to the next slide, slide 5, please. It is important to inspect frequently, randomly, and document it. I recommend using an ultraviolet light because that will show you soil that is not visible under normal fluorescent or incandescent light. Secondly, when you inspect, it's important to document all the good things as well as any deficiencies you might notice. I embrace what is called a 4 senses approach. And the way it works is I stand outside the restroom and listen first to hear if I hear any strange sounds. And then when I walk in, I take a deep breath because what I'm smelling is what folks are going to smell when they walk in. There should be no odors whatsoever. I then take a plastic mat or a large trash bag and I set it on the floor and I sit down on it. It gives me a different view of toilets and urinals and sinks. And finally, with my gloves, I rub them along surfaces, partitions and walls to make sure they're smooth and there's no obstructions. It's also important that you document that quality assurance. Todd mentions he uses a paper system. There happens to be software out there from several vendors that will facilitate that as well. So Amy, if we can go to the next slide. Tip 6, have adequate lighting. Bacteria reproduce a lot slower when it's lit. They prefer darkness to reproduce. Secondly, it's easier to inspect the restroom when it's well illuminated. And third, you'll find that visitors are less likely to misbehave when it's well lit. Plus, from the perspective of the custodians, it's so much easier to clean and disinfect when you can see all the surfaces and fixtures. And music, I've worked with Arcadia High School and the students have their own music piped into the restroom. And that seems to be a very positive influence on their behavior. So Amy, if we can go to our next slide, please. Display artwork in the restrooms. It can be seasonal. It can be sports related. You can even ask your customers to suggest ideas. Folks enjoy humor. I thought this was an appropriate sign that we don't allow selfies in the restroom. And that's also going to reduce the likelihood of somebody tagging or, graffitiing any of the surfaces. Amy, if we can go to number 8, please. Next slide. So the interior partitions in restrooms. I think they should be decorated. Guests love to read. It's a great way to extend the life of that surface. And they're less likely to vandalize or tag a partition. At one school district in Petaluma, what they have put in on their partitions, it's called the Stall Seat Journal. And it's basically the first page of the student newspaper. So again, some ways that I think can extend the life of partitions in particular, and folks will be less likely to abuse them. Amy, if we can go to our next slide, please. Post an emergency phone number in the restroom in case there's a problem. Guests should feel comfortable using it, whether there's a power outage, leaky faucet, overflowing toilet, whatever. You can test the response time. Todd mentions that many of his restrooms have a QR code, and that's another way of alerting the staff that there's an issue. And of course, if you're doing frequent inspections, this shouldn't be used very often. So Amy, if we can go to our next slide, please. Thank your customers for washing their hands and disposing of litter. They appreciate the positive recognition. We're asking our customers to assist in the maintenance of the facility, and it lets you proudly show off your restrooms. By the way, I said I had 10 tips. I didn't tell the truth. I have another tip. So Amy, if you go to next slide, please. Do not use any tools or supplies or equipment that can damage surfaces and fixtures. And Todd mentioned a few, but no sponges. That's the worst cleaning tool ever developed. Bacteria love sponges. No green pads. They scratch the hell out of porcelain and stainless. No pumice stones. And no strong acid bowl cleans. One of the slides I talked about was talking about enzyme cleaners, and Todd mentioned about disinfectants. There's basically 3 ways to apply disinfectants. One is to use a spray bottle, and by the way, hospitals are outlawing that because it aerolizes. A second technique is pre-moistened, where you have the disinfectant in a container and you dip your cleaning tool in it. And the third way, which I think is the best now, is to use an electrostatic sprayer. The electrostatic sprayer changes the chemistry of the disinfectant, so it envelops all the surfaces so you get better coverage. So in conclusion, if you will embrace any of these, your custodians are going to find it's easier to clean and disinfect surfaces, and your guests and customers are going to experience clean and safe and healthy restrooms. So thank you for letting me share some of these tips.
Thank you. Thanks, Perry. We'll now open up the program for a brief Q&A session. We'll address as many questions as time allows. And if you haven't yet, please go ahead and submit your questions now. All right, let's get started. Okay, this one's for you, Todd. You said in step 2 to apply properly mixed university approved disinfectant. Are you using a combination cleaner disinfectant?
Yes, we actually have both, because we do switch back and forth not to be able to get that, germs that get used to one product. But for the most part, what we use is a cleaner disinfectant. If you are using a cleaner disinfectant, you still do need to clean the surface, because that cleaner has to have the dirt removed, or the gross soil, as most of us call it, in order for the disinfectant to really work. And so, you'd go in, wipe it off with the cleaner disinfectant, and then make sure it remains wet for up to 7 to 10 minutes, or depending on what the product says. Whatever a disinfectant says on it is what the directions you need to follow. And that is a legal thing. You need to use that, however the company says it must be used.
Okay. You talked a little bit about engineered water, Todd. Is deionized water considered engineered water?
It is not, as far as I know, as for cleaning and disinfecting, but it is an engineered water, I guess, in the sense that it is removing all the minerals from it. When I'm talking, we're usually talking about something, they're adding a molecule to the water or adding an electric charge to the water that then when it's used, it chemically breaks back down at a later date really quick like. So that's what we would say for restroom cleanings. Again, there's 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 systems out there. Feels like the university's looked at all those over the years, but the one that we have found that we like the best is the ozone, because it seems to do the better job and it's really easy to transport and move around because of the systems that we use.
Okay. There we go. So this could be for both Todd and Perry. Everything you are talking about is surface cleaning and disinfecting, yet we hear EPA and CDC saying that surface cleaning and disinfecting is not as important as air purification. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Perry, let's start with you.
Since we know that the COVID variant is being transmitted via air, I understand that. I know a number of folks are using ionized systems to reduce the particulate count in that. I think it's also important that folks, when it gets to an electrostatic spray, one of the advantages of that is it's also enveloping all the air in the room. And so you're disinfecting bacteria and some viruses that may be, in those. And most importantly, you have to wear proper personal protective equipment because you don't want to be breathing any of this stuff in.
Okay, thanks. Okay, this question's for Todd, I believe. Are you using potassium or sodium hydroxide-based degreasers?
Generally not. Most of them that we use have a very mild butyl or some other product in it. Depends on the level of cleaning we need to do with those degreasers. We actually use 2 different types, and I won't go into brand names because you can get them in 2 or 3 different brands. And I'd have to look up the actual, product that's in those. But one of those works better on petroleum-based oils, and one of those works better on body oils, which is just a little different type of an oil that you get out of the human body. 90% of what we do is for human body oils. And so that was the degreaser we like the best. But being a facility like we are, we have engineering departments, we have mechanical areas, and that's where we use the products for our petroleum-based products to be able to break those down. We don't generally use an enzyme on those petroleum-based products just because we don't want it to get into other stuff that we don't like, but we do use that. But in restrooms, it's usually the product that's designed for removing body oils.
Okay. Perry and Todd, you can both answer this one. What do you recommend for hard water removal?
You need a strong right arm. So if you understand how the pH scale works, we have to use a product that is slightly acidic to break down the calcium deposits and the mineral deposits that are in the water. So part of that is based on frequency of cleaning, and part of it's going to be based on the strength of the chemical that you're using. And I'll turn it over to Todd to supplement that.
Yeah, and totally agree with Perry. I mean, our goal is never to let it get to the point that we have to use a really strong descaling agent that actually eats the calcium. There's numerous ones out there. But again, we like to stay with the milder acids or the non-acids when we can. If you're not allowing it to build up, then you're not going to need to come in with those harder cleaners, which every time you get calcium build up and it sticks, greater chance you're going to damage the fixture. So, if you need a strong one, you get a stronger one. But for the most part, we hardly ever use those. We have places up here that get calcium, but if we're keeping it clean, we don't have to come in with a high hydrochloric or hydrofluoric acid. We don't even make those available to our people because they're so dangerous. We keep mild ones that you could probably lick your fingers with them on, then it wouldn't hurt you, but it wouldn't taste very good. So that's one of our goals up here is safety also.
Okay, good. Okay, let's see. Perry, what type of products have you found that will work on efflorescence on tile floors to get rid of the salt deposits that weep up from the concrete below?
Well, my expertise is not on the chemical side per se, so I'm going to defer that one and let Todd respond.
So, we don't see a lot of issues with stuff coming up. And so I don't really have to deal much with that. Where we do see it though is like on entrance matting and entrance carpeting, which is a whole different issue. But usually if you've got something that's very alkaline, you're going to use an acid to neutralize that. And so they have acids out there that we would neutralize, those with, like when you clean your carpets, you finish with a neutral rinse, which really isn't a neutral rinse, it's a neutralizing rinse. And he brings that back up to the acid side and helps remove that. Biggest thing, what we've seen is plenty of water, plenty of flushing, and that usually takes care of those problems.
Okay. Todd, can you expand on enzyme cleaners a little bit? This person says they use enzymes down drains only for odor control. What are some other uses?
So the biggest places we've seen them is, I shouldn't say seen them, the biggest place we use them is when people get urine all over the walls. It does get into the grout. It does become bacteria as it starts to break down. It also gets on the floor. And so what we would come in and we would spray those areas with the enzyme cleaner or mop it down or put it down with a scrubby. Just kind of depends on the area and how it is. And then if you can keep it moist and warm, enzyme cleaners love to eat things. It'll eat the bacteria, it'll eat the stuff that causes odors. So that's where we've had really good luck in using it. We don't use it a lot. Drains is a place we do use it too. Again, keeps the drains clean, smelling fresh, and open. That's a nice thing if you can use them in the drains. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay. Perry or Todd, why wouldn't you use a pumice stone in the restrooms?
Well, the second step of cleaning, we call it pickup, and the goal is not to injure yourself or damage the surface. A pumice stone will damage surfaces. If you look at any porcelain fixtures, basically there's a coating of glass, and you use a pumice stone, you scratch it, and now you've provided a place for bacteria to breed. So same thing with the powdered cleansers. They have grits in them, and if they're not used properly, they will scratch that porcelain. So cream cleansers, and again, if you're cleaning properly, you should never have to use a pumice stone.
Okay.
And I will totally agree with Perry. My only use of pumice stone is to remove calluses.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. All right, we have a couple of questions about stainless steel. If I stop using stainless cleaner and start using degreaser, will the degreaser stick to the stainless steel?
We have not seen that. Again, you have to have the right degreasing agent, and you don't want a strong one. Some of them will actually damage stainless steel, so you need to get one that is a very mild cleaner. We have actually used degreasers that have enzymes in them, and what we find is that does work really good on your stainless steel. Again, it's mild. We usually will spray it onto a rag and not spray it onto the stainless steel, much like you would do your home refrigerators and things like that. So you're not overloading the surface. That's what we've had our greatest luck with doing. Stainless steel is hard. I know it stains less, but it is hard because everything you get on it seems to show up. Okay,
so on that note, instead of using microfiber rags, is using paper towels for cleaning effective on stainless steel?
I'll try to answer that. The advantage of the paper towels is it's a one-time use, so you're basically preventing any cross-contamination. However, microfiber does a superior job of removing small particles of soil without damaging the surfaces. And the microfibers, if you have a washing machine system, can be washed and laundered, 300 to 500 times without losing the efficacy. So again, it depends on, but what the objectives are as far as green cleaning goes. There's advantages to both, but I think the microfiber solution is still a better practice to use.
Okay. Thank you. Is the industry standard still 2 minutes a fixture in cleaning restrooms, or has new technology with quicker dwell times and kill claims made this 2-minute standard false, Perry?
So what I've seen is that actually it was 2.5 minutes. That used to be the standard for any, and it's 3 fixtures. It's toilets, urinals, and sinks. But that is dependent on 3 things: the quality of your custodian and the day of the week. The second thing is, what is the condition of the facility itself? And the third is, what work method is one using? That 2.5 minute standard is based on a bucket and mop system. If you're using a spray and vac, the time standard is 1.5 minutes or less. And so it's going to vary based on the work method being used.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Todd, this one's for you. Why no acid-based cleaners for toilet bowls?
So what we've learned when we get acid-based cleaners is they actually do damage. People love to spray them in there and walk away, which is a really bad thing. We have fixtures up here, and I know Perry mentioned this a little bit with pumice stones, but where people have had access to acids, they've dumped them in, and now there is no enamel on that surface anymore. So it just builds up, it comes back really quick and it gets to the point where we end up just removing and replacing the fixtures if that's happened. That has not happened in a long time for us, because as we've moved into what we do, we have really fought to say, no, you cannot have this acid. If you are using an acid, or especially a stronger one, you need to use it, wash it down, get it off the surface as soon as you can, so you're not doing that damage.
Okay. Great. Next question is hydrogen peroxide an effective disinfectant? Do you use that as a disinfectant, Todd?
We have used it. We do not use it in restrooms generally. We usually use it more for touch points. It usually has a quicker kill claim on certain things, but hydrogen peroxide also has issues because on certain metals, it will cause problems. On certain other surfaces, you do have to be careful where you're using hydrogen peroxide. I actually have some fixtures inside of elevators where people have sprayed it and not removed it. And now we have some really cool white lines inside those elevators. So again, hydrogen peroxide, effective disinfectant. Again, you do want to look at seeing what the disinfectant is designed to kill, what bacteria or viruses it is designed, before you use it. Most of what we use are broad spectrum disinfectants, and so they kill, the major stuff.
Okay. What are some best practices to clean built up soap and dirt grime off of older sinks?
I guess I can kind of answer that. A lot of elbow grease. That's probably the biggest thing right there. If you've allowed it to get built up, you've already got a problem. And then it's going to come down to, what you need to use to remove that. If you're already removing a soap, all you need to do is get that soap reliquefied again. And then you can just kind of scrub it off. You don't need to be using a chemical on it. If it's dirt and grime, that's where your mild acids are going to come in. A porcelain cleaning type acid. Descalers work better on calcium, less on grease and that. But again, once you get that on there, you're going to need to give it some time to break down whatever's on there and then come in with, again, elbow grease, a lot of hard work, clean them up. I'd like to say there's an easy method. The easiest method would be to pay somebody to come in and replace the enamel on your surface, where they would come in and literally remove it with a very strong acid and then resurface it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Perry, this one's for you. Under your extra tip, you said no sponges or green pads on fixtures. What can you use to agitate then?
Well, you can use a white pad. In other words, you can use pads that are not as aggressive. You can certainly use microfiber. You can use a toilet brush or bristle brush. And again, as Todd mentioned, elbow grease is important. You know, one of the things about cleaning is sometimes you have to repeat the process because that soil has either been there for a while or it's stubborn. And so, but if you're cleaning and disinfecting frequently, we should not be running across some of these issues. So microfiber towels, white pads, I would express a caution. Mr. Clean has these magic erasers. Be very careful with those. You want to make sure there's some kind of lubricant because they do have a tendency to scratch if you're not careful.
Good to know. Okay, this question could be for Todd or Perry. My facility uses a touchless disinfecting system and electrostatic sprayers. Do you recommend one method over the other?
Let me try to deal with that. Touchless is a fancy way of saying spray and vac. In other words, you apply your cleaner or your disinfectant via a spray nozzle under pressure. You then agitate with brushes, you rinse, and then you remove that dirty solution with a wet vacuum. That's the concept. Electrostatic sprayers do a phenomenal job of enveloping all surfaces due to the chemistry of the way the electrostatic sprayer works. So what I have found in my experience is the spray and vac system is a more effective system for particularly larger restrooms. And again, I'm not endorsing any vendor or anything, but I just have found that the cleanest restrooms, even in the box stores, they're using spray and vac technology as the way to keep those restrooms clean and healthy.
Okay. Okay, let's see. What kind of enzyme cleaner would be suggested for neglected restroom grout, and what should be used to keep grout from getting built up between deep scrubbing, Todd?
So, you know, you'll need to check with your local vendor, but just basically tell them you need an enzyme. You know, I'm not going to pick out any specific brand because it may not be available in your area, depending on what company you purchase from. But if you check with your local vendor, tell them you want an enzyme that will remove, usually urine is the biggest thing you see on the floors, sometimes fecal matter that gets down into your grout. And so basically that's what you're going to want to have. You may want an enzyme that will eat some oil because a lot of oils get tracked into restrooms from parking lots and things like that. That is probably where I would start, is get an enzyme cleaner. Again, once an enzyme cleaner is placed on the surface, it needs to be left there. It's not a spray and walk away and hope it works. You need to leave it moist, let it do its job. If you can keep it warm and moist, it even works better, but you can't always keep it warm and moist. But, you know, most enzymes, you get them down, they'll continue to work for many hours, 24, maybe even 48 if you get really lucky, especially depending on what bacteria is on the surface that they're eating, because basically they're feeding themselves. You know, that's a simple explanation. But, you know, if you have to use the enzymes, that's what I really do prefer. There is, you know, some stronger chemicals out there which are more like bleach type products, but we have found they're not as effective for removing the buildup because really you're having to force it out through mechanical means more than letting the bacteria do its work.
Okay. Todd, you talked a little bit about air fresheners. Would you recommend not using air freshener in the restroom?
You know, when at all possible, we avoid it. So what we have done, and this is where our air freshener comes from, we buy those urinal screens. And of course, they all have a different smell. The ones that we pick, we actually have like 3 or 4 different smells available. I wanted to say flavors, but smells available. And so if your restroom is being cleaned well and there's really no odor into it, when you drop those into there, then you get a smell in the restroom, but it's not a cover-up smell, but it's more of a, oh, hey, this is kind of a nice scent in here. It's really obvious when you're trying to cover up stuff with air fresheners. And, I know they're a big thing, companies sell them. But we try to avoid that. And again, there's an additional cost for us, 500 and some odd restrooms. If we were putting some air fresheners in every one, that's a lot of money for us. And so we try to get clean. And then where we do put urinal screens in, we use that smell, to cover up. If you have a high use restroom where you do got hundreds of people coming in, yeah, maybe. But again, we avoid that here where I'm at.
Okay. We have time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll close the program for the day. This one is about antimicrobial nano coatings. These technologies are on the market today. Do you know if we can use our cleaning agents on these types of coated surfaces?
Let me address that. So these products are, the nanotechnology is, a nano is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So it's very small particles that chemically bond to surfaces to protect them. And they're very, very durable. There's only a couple things that can actually scratch these surfaces. One is diamond and the other is sapphire, because they're very hard stones. So once these things are put on surfaces, and some of them are actually infused with antimicrobial products, whether it's microban or silver ion, it does affect it reduces the likelihood that bacteria will survive. However, you still have to clean that surface to remove the soil.
All right. Well, this will be our final question. During the pandemic, some clients are requesting us to use bleach. Do you advise this?
I personally say absolutely no. Bleach is a hypochlorite. It's one of 8 different types of disinfectants. I recommend you go to the EPA website and take a look at the certified products that are effective against COVID-2. And you'll find that there's over 500 of them now that have been approved. So the problem with bleach, there's several. One, it's very corrosive. It's unhealthy. You mix it with ammonia and you can, say goodbye. And it damages surfaces in the environment. So I know it's inexpensive, but it's really not what I would recommend using with the COVID-19 crisis.
Okay. All right, Todd, did you have any final words?
I would totally agree with Perry on that. Bleach is not a good cleaner. There's much better products on the market, and it does do damage. We do not allow our people to have it. So.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, thanks everyone for your questions. Before we conclude, I would like to thank our webinar sponsors, Sterimis by Tome Environmental Solutions and TBS Capital Funding, and of course, our wonderful presenters, Todd Stoneking and Perry Shimanoff. All of you will receive an email with a link to the archive presentation by the end of the week, and we will also post this as a video on our website, cmmonline.com. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Perry. Thanks, Todd. Y'all have a great and safe afternoon.